Okay, Bruchim Aboim. I just want to talk about two news stories that came up recently about Israel. Again, I'm an American. I really don't have any say what goes on in Israel. It's really none of my business. But one of them, really strongly demonstrates why Israel is not a Jewish state, even if they want to claim to be. There was a group of people who converted to the religion of Judaism, because Judaism is a religion, not a race. Anybody from any race can convert to Judaism as long as they're serious about it. And they were seeking to move to Israel because Israel law that Jewish people have a right to immigrate to Israel. And this was not the chief rabbinate this time. This was the Tzachnut, I'm not sure what they call it, Jewish agency, who were refusing to recognize these people's conversion to Judaism based on various factors and so forth. But this is really the antithesis to Judaism, to deny someone, and really the antithesis of everything that they always told us that Israel was all about. Israel was supposed to be to save the refugees. They said, well, what would happen if there was Israel during the Holocaust, then the Holocaust wouldn't have happened. Now that's heresy, because God's in control, and if God wants a Holocaust, He's going to have it, no matter what, and nothing human beings can do can stop it. That's first of all. That's total heresy. Second of all, we see it's not true, because there's more anti-Semitism now because of Israel. And a story like this here, they're denying people who profess the Jewish faith, who are refugees seeking to escape a country where there's a lot of persecution, in Venezuela. And so we see that it's essentially the opposite of everything that they claim. They always told us, we're here to save you, and what are they doing? They're doing nothing. They're not letting these people in. So they don't care about refugees who are trying to escape anti-Semitism, things like that. So it shows the total emptiness of the state of Israel. Now, again, like I said in previous videos, I don't have a problem with the country as a democratic country that doesn't claim to be a Jewish state, even if it has certain Jewish cultural and somewhat religious practices, and that religious Jews are free to practice their religion. And if they want to have, Saturday be the day when you don't deliver mail and the banks are closed and so forth, and the government is closed and things, I don't see a problem in that per se, as long as it's not calling itself a Jewish state. The same like America. America is essentially a Christian country, but not a Christian state, meaning, most post offices are closed on Sunday, although there are some that are closed on Saturday, which are also because of Christianity, not because of Judaism. Excuse me, but certain neighborhoods that are predominantly Seventh-day Adventist, they have their post offices open on Sunday and closed on Saturday. But again, that's from Christianity. Christmas is a national holiday and so forth. So it's a Jewish country, but it's a Christian country, America. But it's not a Christian state, meaning we don't have an official state religion. And if that type of approach were with Israel, and they didn't have a chief rabbinate, and they didn't have preferential treatment for Jews and so forth, it probably would not be a violation of all the prohibitions that the Talmud very clearly prohibits, violating the oaths, and essentially what we call today Zionism. And it's theoretically that wouldn't be as problematic. That's neither here nor there. But that's a different issue. But that being said, I saw another story. The Israeli Supreme Court came out about the women of the wall. I'm fascinated by this phenomenon on several different levels. Now, both on this particular group, the Women of the Wall, a small group, and their goals and so forth, as well as the Haredi reaction to it. And in a sense, I see both being problematic, but really I see the Haredi reaction in a sense to be worse than the Women of the Wall. Why? It's like this. It's because I understand with the Women of the Wall, they're trying just to be, to practice whatever they have, and they have certain goals and so forth, and they want certain practices.
Respect.
Excuse me, I just want to check what time it was. And even though from a religious standpoint I might not agree necessarily with them, but as someone who values a certain libertarianism, I do believe that they should be afforded the right to practice in the way that they want. But the question is, why are they focused on this? Like, what is this fetishization of the Western Wall? Meaning, nobody is preventing them from buying their own property and practicing their religious practices as they see fit on their own private property. And doing so would be violation of religious freedom, even though Israel doesn't really have religious freedom, essentially, but in the sense how America has. But let's say according to the American value of religious freedom. On the other hand, I can't walk into a church and demand that they allow me to have Jewish service there. Neither can a Christian walk into a synagogue and demand to have a Christian service there. Now, perhaps, depending on the church or the synagogue, they might allow such a thing, and such a thing is rather common throughout the United States, especially when congregations are in need or so forth, and there are churches that meet in synagogues and synagogues that meet in churches and so forth, and mosques and so forth that meet in churches or synagogues. Not something that you'll necessarily find in the Orthodox circles, but in the Reform and Conservative Judaism, that's a rather common practice. But no one can force it, meaning they decide on their own. Now, what's the status of the Western Wall? Who? Nobody owns it. It's a national heritage site, and so therefore, it's nationalized and it's under the control of the government. And the question is, well, how? And the government gives it over to religious authorities that are government religious authorities. They're not independent, non-government religious authorities. They're employed by the government in Israel, as opposed to how we have in the United States, where the only government religious leaders would be, the only government clergy would be chaplains, institutional chaplains. So I can question, well, what is the goal here? I mean, because nobody is saying you're not welcome to pray here. I mean, even, people of other religions come and pray at the Western Wall, and they have respect for the norms of Orthodox Judaism. When they're there, they'll put on a yarmulke, and things like that. But they won't demand that men can go in the women's section, women could go in the men's section, because they understand that Orthodox Judaism is the standard there. Not necessarily, although in a sense they are, but mostly because it's the highest common denominator. It's something that can include everyone, meaning it's generally understood that a Reformed Jew and a conservative Jew can pray in an Orthodox synagogue. There's no exclusion for someone who is not observant to attend an Orthodox synagogue. However, the Orthodox will not, and according to their religion, do not go to Reform and Conservative. So that's the issue there. Now, so therefore, it's not the people who are excluded, practices that are being excluded. Now, there's a different issue here, though. That's from their side, as far as the side of the woman of the wall. Meaning, if, let's say, the wall was privatized, would they still have the same argument and so forth if it wasn't government run and so forth? Now, I feel the bigger issue, though, is the Haredi response. Because how I understand Haredi Judaism is non-Zionist, anti-Zionist. Now, for most part, the anti-Zionists don't go to the Western Wall, though some do. And so most of the Haredim who go to the Western Wall are going to be the non-Zionist. But still, they have to understand, what does this mean? Which a lot of them are not educated about. We are not allowed to be violent. We're not allowed to be rebellious. And essentially, this whole thing, the way they react to the women of the wall, is essentially strengthening the Jewishness of the Western Wall and of Israel, which they're not supposed to do, because if you're not Zionist, now, of course, the Western Wall is a holy place in Judaism. That's not the question. The question is, how can we approach it if the government decided tomorrow to allow the women of the wall, or to allow mixed prayer? What would be the Haredi response? And the proper Haredi response should be humility, and say, all right, just like when the Arabs were in charge, we had no right to tell them what to do, so too in Israel, we have no right to impose upon them. Meaning, if we want to vote, and if according to the non-Zionists who do vote, so then their stance should be as strong as any other by virtue of their numbers in a democracy. And that's it. Nothing more. And so, since their numbers are the minority, they have no right to impose on the majority ideas. And for the most part, I think most of the people in the government, and the common average person in Israel, would agree with the Orthodox standpoint. And I'm not talking to the modern Orthodox here, because the modern Orthodox are justified in their opposition to the women of the wall, those who oppose it, which are the majority of the modern Orthodox, because they are Zionists. and so therefore their views are justified because it's consistent, as opposed to the non-Zionists and anti-Zionists. There's no consistency to oppose the women of the wall in more than their own numbers. And since it is a government-run place, the Haredim losing their power because they're living in a democratic society until, their numbers just outnumber them. Which is why I think it's very wise, even though I myself, when I have visited the Holy Land, have gone to the Western Wall many times, although I haven't been there in well over a decade. I haven't been to the Holy Land since before I was married. I don't know what I would do now. It would depend on a lot of factors whether I would go or not. But I even though I always was questioning the Satmarov's approach and had a difficult time understanding the Satmarov's approach, forbidding going to the Western Wall, and it's a difficult thing for most people to deal with. However, now, in retrospect, we can see the wisdom in it, because it's avoiding the conflict also. Meaning, because the Satmarov did go before the Medina. In the 20s, he went to the wall. It's just after 48, Jews were not allowed to go, and after 67, they were allowed to go. And the Satmarov said he encouraged his Hasidim not to go. He discouraged them from going, and it makes sense now. The one thing the Satmar community is trying to keep is that Meron, which is the burial place of Rabbi Shimon Yochai, should not come under government control in Israel. And I think because that was the one last place that the Satmar could still go, essentially, and so with that, I see there's certain wisdom in not going to the Western Wall. And also, in addition, we can look at someone like Professor Yeshayahu Lebowitz, who was not a Satmar. He was a modern Orthodox, but he felt that there was like I said, a fetishization of the wall, which almost borders on almost like idolatry, which is problematic, and we have to be wary of, even those who go. I'm not saying that everyone who goes fetishizes the wall, but certainly if you're going to be violent and angry and so forth, well, then you're missing the point, and so I really feel that the Haredim should leave this alone, leave this to God. You don't have to go to the wall. Meaning, if the government wants to keep it like this, they'll keep it how it's always been, since 67 with the Mechitza, and the women of the wall don't want mixed prayers, by the way, because they consider themselves Orthodox. Actually, they want to have separate prayers. They don't want to sit with men together, but they want to be able to read the Torah. Gemara says that women could, just it's not done because of coveted tzibur. It's not really a sin. It's just something that hasn't really been done. Although it seems in certain cases perhaps it was, because in Baghdad, in the time of the Ben Ish Chai, the holy Ben Ish Chai we all look up to, there was the story of Pirchas Asun, who came to visit Baghdad from India, where she was living. Her family was from Baghdad, and she wanted to learn from the Sefer Torah that her grandfather had donated to the shul, and she did so. And they let her, and I'm pretty sure the Ben Ish Chai let her. It was in the time of the Ben Ish Chai. Even though I never heard any response from Ben Ish Chai, but still. Now, yes, there is all kinds of ideological and hashkafic reasons and so forth why we should oppose these things, and I don't disagree with it. I'm just talking on the government level, on the political level. If you're voting for if those who do for a candidate, you vote your conscience, someone who opposes this that you oppose. That makes sense. But again, you can't impose something unless the majority want. It seems though still in Israel there is still a majority that wants to keep a status quo for many reasons, and in a sense they're almost using the Haredim as a tool, which the Haredim should be aware of. But of course the Haredi communities are not monolithic by any means. So you're not going to get a uniform approach in these things. So it's difficult on both ends. But I really think, the Haredi communities should sit back quietly, and if the government would decide to change things for the Western Wall, so if you're uncomfortable with that, you have to make a choice. Which is more important, to go to the wall or to have a place where women are not allowed to read from the Torah, or and so forth, and all these different questions. So these are things we have to think about and not have knee-jerk reactions, because they're very complicated, and we should approach them in a thoughtful way, an intelligent way, and without emotions, and right decisions. All right, and everyone will probably come to their own decision, and each Rebbe, and each Gadol, each Posek will have his own approach, and perhaps he'll have a lot on one side and a few on another side, and I'm sure there's going to be individuals who will still, but it's things are not going to stay this way, and it's not really worth it with real issues like the draft and things which are trying to take the Haredim away from their Haredi identity, or change what it means, the Haredi identity. Those are much more important issues than issues about the Western Wall, and so we should pick our battles, and that's really the answer. All right, thank you very much. God bless you. Please like, share, and subscribe, and I hope to see you all another time. Thank you.